So I don't know if you know anything about this company or the Disney Plus TV series or whichever, but basically I watch Bloomberg and I kind of track a lot of startup stuff that happens around the world and lots of different stuff. And there was this company a while back called Theranos that kind of popped up, and often, at least in England, you see stuff when it starts to go wrong. And Disney Plus, there's a TV series about it called The Dropout, which I've been kind of watching. And basically, they had the promise which they set up. So, a lady called Elizabeth Holmes, that's the actress, that's not her, but this is just on the TV show. Made the promise that basically they could run hundreds of blood tests from a single drop of blood with this magical machine that Theranos had invented. And basically, they kind of lied and made it all up, but raised hundreds of millions of pounds. And it's this massive court case now between, it's basically fraud. But the stories of how it's gone on, the reason why it's a Disney Plus series is actually it's really interesting, because what's funny is that they go through the story of her and her background and stuff. And I've got 5 points I'm going to kind of talk about. But actually, I find it really interesting because one of them is to do with how important the board is in signing off kind of what she's doing. But I genuinely sit on the boards of companies and I can see this happening. And I'm going to go into it, but the point is, I just wanted to do 5 things that we can learn from the Theranos kind of disaster, because it's an absolute mess. Lots of people kind of got suckered in, really smart people, but it was just the pressure and the way they did it that I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. So I'm just going to get my pen. So as her background, so Elizabeth Holmes went to Stanford as a university, which is an exceptionally good kind of tech-based university in California. So she was obviously very, very bright, and that was clear kind of from the start. As you kind of go through, one of the things that she wanted to do was help change the world and do almost like biomedical science and that kind of medical device. And what was funny is that I related to it in a lot of different ways, because when I did my undergrad at Sheffield in mechanical engineering and then later my PhD, I kind of get, they showed some university labs and the team, and it's fairly realistic. But what also came through, and you do also see this in a lot of universities, is really smart people come into university, but at a younger age, you're as bright as you are throughout your life, but you don't have the same reference points and knowledge. And you see this a lot where students will come in and say, oh, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? And there's lots of reasons, technical reasons that are well known, well proven as you go through your career. And basically, naivety or whatever, when she was going through, she always, although she was like a freshman or a sophomore, she wanted to be working in postgrad groups, and she was kind of thinking above her station a little bit, making assumptions that things should work when actually they knew they wouldn't. And that kind of rolls through that. Basically what she decided to do was drop out of university, start her own company to follow this dream that she didn't know would work. Turns out it didn't work. But actually she was quite manipulative in how she kind of did it, and it's fascinating. So if you check it out on Disney Plus or Hulu, definitely kind of worth working out. But number 1, don't fake it. So people often say fake it till you make it. This, that's often used in terms of confidence, where if you present online or whatever. But if you have a technical evidence-based product, especially in healthcare, do not lie and pretend you have something that works and what doesn't. One of the big ethical dramas that happens in the show is that she puts more and more and more pressure on their engineering team to make this thing work when they all know it doesn't. It's still 5-10 years away from kind of working. But she's so adamant, and she knows that to chase the money to make the dream work, she needs to get investors. But to get investors, they have to have proof of trials and stuff. And one of the things that they do in the show, or they did in real life, was take this machine that they know doesn't work to cancer patients to give them false hope, to run a trial, even though they know it's not going to work. Just to say to investors that they're running a medical trial. And often when you raise investment, it's all about reaching the next milestone. That what she was doing was building the dream, but lying, knowing that it was consciously wrong. Yeah, so don't fake it till you make it. Some people say that, and almost in some instances, some people kind of get away with it. I think Richard Branson, in his book, he talks about when he was offered his first few contracts, he didn't know how to do it. And I think it was the music industry, but he just winged it and he kind of got away with it. But again, that's not with people's lives, but actually, especially for an engineering product where someone can get injured, don't do that. Your credibility will take a hit. That actually, part of the reason why Theranos went so wrong is that there was almost a psychotic level of lying about the truth, and it really kind of, came back to them. Relating to that, you've got to be honest. One of the things that you see with any company, or if you hire people, or you're seeking investment, or you have a board, is actually a case of, being honest with people. Look, this is where we're at with the product. I always make it massively clear that my minimum viable product for the roadmap is a book. It's a physical paper-based kind of thing that, yes, we have dreams for an app, but we're not there yet. But that's okay. I think sometimes, especially when you're younger, you do think that things have to be perfect before you launch it. And the truth is you don't, but at least if you're honest about where you're at. One of the challenges that they had at Theranos was that not only did they lie to investors to say this thing worked when it didn't, internally within the business, they lied to the team and they started to play people off against each other and silo things out so that nobody found out that actually none of it worked, and it was just a complete mess. But actually, in terms of just communicating to your team, your investors, your family, your friends, your stakeholders, being honest is really, really important for a company or for anyone. They didn't do that, and although they managed to kind of wing it and blag it for a long time, she probably will go to prison, and actually rightfully so, and it's just so important to do. Number 3, don't ignore the experts. Throughout the show, almost at every single level, and this could be finance experts, biomedical science people, medical people, it didn't work. It was never going to work. And what happened was that both the Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO, purposely chose to ignore and then fire anyone that didn't kind of buy into the vision about what she wanted to do in the business. So actually, when people said, look, it's not working, she didn't just learn from it and improve. She kind of sacked them and got them out of the team. But then likewise, even the board and some really smart people. So for instance, the episode I watched last night was that they got investment from a really major chain in America. I think it was Walgreens. And the CEO was super keen because he was under pressure to keep his business afloat. That when the experts that they'd hired to check out the Theranos labs in the background were basically raising all these red flags, even he chose to ignore them because he had a dream and a vision and his own pressures. And, I haven't finished the last few episodes of the series, but basically if you hire people to really kind of give advice on a certain thing, listen to them. They do it for a reason. I'm sure there's no malice or intent. They don't want to, scupper your idea. But actually, if someone comes up with feedback or an idea or something that just doesn't fit with what you do, that's often a good thing. It's better to learn from it. Don't just silo it, sack people, and create that culture. That's something Theranos did. You do not want to do that. Number 4. This is really interesting, actually. So this is to do with how the board plays a really important role in any company, and especially any larger company or kind of floated, public kind of company. But it's also a little bit worrying because I sit on the boards of companies too. And as a prime example, what the CEO told the board wasn't true. And the issue you have is that often a board is there to add credibility to a business. That it could be that you want to break into the educational technology business. So if you had an education expert on your board, it gives you a lot more credibility to raise finance and stuff. But then likewise, it's also knowledge and expertise and background and experience that really can kind of help. But what's interesting is that what they declared to the board was either a complete lie or they didn't tell them the truth. But as a board member myself, what that then brings up is that companies that I've sat on the boards of in the past or even now, how much do you actually take for granted and how much do I really need to dig in to really find out, does that technology do what we say it's going to do? Because at the moment, I'm telling people it does, but do I really know? And it's just really interesting that likewise, if you have a board for your company, build really good skills and experience that can add value to what you want to do, but kind of listen to them as well. But then likewise, if you're like me and you actually sit on the boards of companies, it is kind of your duty to really check that. It's almost like a trustee of a charity. You're responsible for other people's money and that kind of trust element. That it's something that went horribly wrong in this instance, but actually it's relevant to a lot of people. And then last but not least, one of the big things that happens with any company sale, company acquisition, or merger deal, whatever, is due diligence, or it certainly should be. So due diligence is when you check out the facts, the figures, the background. Is the story that they're telling you correct? Can you evidence it? Can you get references, etc.? Because what you want to do is make sure that whatever you buy is what you think you're buying, or that their claims are correct. And as an engineer, I've spent my time in labs and stuff as well, even down to the assumptions that they make. the classic thing with data and when, you know, evidence and stuff is that how you choose to interpret it is very fluid. And actually, there's a lot of nuance to it, but actually due diligence is super important for any startup because basically it builds trust in terms of who you are, what you're trying to do, and almost gives a warranty, a guarantee with investors or stakeholders that what you're doing is actually true. In Theranos, basically what they do was that companies who invested in them didn't do any or didn't do enough, or Theranos lied about the evidence that they gave. But basically all of these are all like basically sense checks. These are things that are there to protect stakeholders, the company, investors, whichever. And actually when they were all missed, almost all of them, bad things happen and it just spirals out of control. And basically what I wanted to do, because this is super relevant to anyone, either in a startup that wants to grow and kind of build something, or if you're an investor or whichever, yeah, when you see stuff go wrong really badly, it's one of the best things you can ever do to actually learn from. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. I would love to know in the comments, you know, have you ever seen anything like this? Have you watched the show? What did you think? What do you think of, I don't want to say of Elizabeth Holmes, but actually her mentality and the way that she went through it, and almost the, you know, doing tests on cancer patients and looking them in the eye, but knowing that it doesn't work. You've got to be a little bit psychotic to kind of do that and have complete faith. And but that's almost why it makes a great TV show. But the point is, this was real, and it's really interesting to talk about as well. So my name's Steve Pugh. If you catch up on YouTube, I'd love it if you kind of get in touch. And yes, I'll move on to my last one.